Welcome back to another episode of Anne Rice's Mayfair Witches Recap. Many narrative points were introduced to us in the Mayfair Witches AMP pilot from last 2 weeks. Rowan Fielding, played by Alexandra Daddario, is a surgeon who frequently has witchy psychological interactions with patients, which frequently cause them to burst a brain artery, die, or sustain major injuries. This week, we meet Deidre up close, travel briefly but disturbingly back in time to the 17th century in Scotland, learn all about Cyprian, and travel with Rowan to New Orleans. Get ready to watch episode 2, The Dark Place, and grab your broom. This week, we make some time and distance trip. A scruffy lady is seen caring for a sick man in the opening scene of this episode, which takes place in 1681 in Donalave, Scotland. As night falls, she instructs a young lady by the name of Suzanne to take her younger sister Flory to gather more burdock and willow bark. A mysterious, hat-wearing figure hiding behind a tree interrupts their time spent gathering herbs by threateningly telling Suzanne that she doesn't want to keep him waiting. Suzanne instructs Flory to go and recite the names of the herbs they chose while she visited the man, since it seems like something she has experienced previously. The man is leaning against a tree when Suzanne, who is incredibly repulsed, pleases him. It's an odd and disgusting situation overall. Then, she notices a flock of crows flying across the sky and squawking. The present. Rowan examines Ellie's possessions and documents while sitting on the floor of her house, unhappy and perplexed. She contacts the purported agency that handled her closed adoption in 1991 and informs them that Rowan's biological parents were the subject of years of calls from her now deceased adoptive mother Ellie, but she was never successful in getting any information. Perhaps the permissions have altered since she left, allowing Rowan to obtain some clarification. She is told by the bewildered woman on the phone that she was unable to have been adopted from that agency because it didn't begin operations until 1995. She hangs up the phone, overcome with paranoia and a sense of betrayal. Rowan sees a mystery black automobile that appears to be following her as she strolls along the dock at night and chooses to ignore it. She makes an effort to understand the lies she has been told about her adoption, but ultimately turns to alcohol. Alone the end of the evening, she is intoxicated and by herself in her boat with an urn containing Ellie's ashes. She starts to nod off after hearing some whispers. Then Deidre, who is concealed by a transparent sheet and hearing the same whispers as her daughter, is brought to our attention. Her life would eventually change, and everything would be better, Lasha reminds her. Given that he discovered her daughter Rowan, that transformation is imminent. She is awake and in a dark place, but she must take control if she wants to see her. Simple enough, yes. Deidre wakes up from her catatonic state while sitting on the front porch of the mansion, and is startled to discover the maid feeding her. As she accepts her troubling truth, one tear slides down her cheek. A hungover Rowan makes breakfast and listens to the news, which mentions that the body of a charred woman was found in Phoenix. Rowan is preoccupied with the fact that her boss seems to have taken her off the rotation. She tells her boss that all her surgeries since her mother's passing have been successful, though he says she's off her game and needs to be cleared by Dr. Davis on the psych team before returning to work. Cyprian surveys Rowan's boat while he meets Davis, where he discovers opened alprazolam packets and a glass filled with leftover wine. Rowan lies to Davis about her sleeping patterns and anxiousness since she only wants to go ahead to start working again. Rowan from the previous night is curled up on the floor sobbing when Cyprian picks up a glass and looks over. Then he takes her luggage, which is what causes Daniel Lemmel to pass away and collapse. When Davis asks about Lemmel's death, Rowan becomes significantly agitated, which causes Davis to experience a severe headache. Davis, who claims to experience the discomfort frequently, claims it is not exclusive to Rowan. But suddenly Davis had a nosebleed, and Rowan once more hears the whispering. Rowan immediately departs the session after being terrified by the circumstance. Rowan walks up to her car, exhausted, and sees that it is covered with bird droppings. Could it go any worse for her today? Her mind enters the strange area it does just before her witchy talents take over as she stares at a group of crows screeching in the tree above her. The birds take off, only to crash to their deaths into her automobile. She stuffs the dead birds into her car after wrapping them in her jacket out of sheer panic. Meanwhile, Cyprian observes from a far-off parking space, snaps photos, and eventually follows her to the shore. She buries the birds in a little, sandy grave out of frustration, takes a medicine, and then lies down. In her dream, a healthy Ellie is calling to her as she stands in front of the New Orleans mansion wearing a green dress. While talking on the phone with the agency, Cyprian watches Rowan sleep and expresses his struggle with her and belief that she need to be aware of who she truly is. They say that she has to be watched more closely, particularly since she killed someone. On the phone, Cyprian reminds his coworker that, prior to being taken in and given this position, he was also prepared to murder someone and was viewed by his mother as the devil. Ellie tried her best for 30 years to keep her away from New Orleans, but he is reminded that if she learns who she truly is, she will want to go there. But would that truly be that horrible, wonders Cyprian. We recatch up with Lasher and Deidre while they are in a somewhat hazy, trance-like state. He comments that she seemed to be waking up and inquires as to if she can recall the electroshock she received in the hospital, during which she managed to communicate with him despite not knowing her own name. She tries to say the words her mother had taught her that have led her to Lasher, but instead she wakes up on the porch of the mansion. The kind doctor from last week is relieved that the medication appears to have worn off and offers to put her in touch with a lawyer who, in his opinion, can help her with her predicament. He plays the shot, and Deidre plays the part of still being in that trance-like state. On the beach, folks holding a late-night party force Rowan to stay awake. She turns around as she walks away and calls after herself after spotting the dark automobile again and sensing being pursued. Rowan doesn't believe Cyprian when he surrenders and claims he isn't a threat. He holds her hand as she tries to depart, causing him to pass out as a result. As an ambulance rushes him to the hospital, Rowan snatches his phone and finds numerous photos of her on it. One of an old family and a 1990 photo of what looks to be Ellie outside the mansion are also included in the collection, and is Lasher seen in one of them in the background. Before being checked into the hospital, Cyprian makes his escape. Deidre enters her childhood bedroom, which is a huge flashback for her. When she puts the necklace on, Lasher arrives and informs her that he has been urging Rowan to visit them in her dreams. Rowan just got on a plane to New Orleans, so it appears to be working. And this is definitely strange. Deidre and Lasher engage in sexual activity, and Rowan, who is dozing off on the aircraft, appears to also, sort of, have an orgasm. Deidre hears Carlotta and the maid discussing a meeting back downstairs, and she decides to crash it. The maid agrees to let her leave the house since she is relieved to find her in good mental health. Rowan, who is fatigued, makes it to her hotel without realizing that Carlotta was in the lobby mingling with guests in preparation for that shady encounter. When Deidre enters Uncle Cortland's home, memories of his extravagant parties come back to her, forcing her to relive her past once more. He expresses his regret for not attempting to save her from her aunt when he had the chance and is startled to see her standing in his house all these years later. She lies and says that even after all these years, she is still unsure when he asks if he is still alive. Rowan asks a tour guide at the hotel bar if she has ever seen the mansion in her picture. She explains that the family paid to have the old, notorious Mayfair house taken from the tour and immediately recognizes it as such. The woman agrees to lead her to it with a little inducement. She adds that although the family is well known for many different things, their witches are what it is most well known for. Rowan's dream saw Deidre wearing an old green dress that belonged to Cortland's kid. Deidre claims that whenever she wore a dress he gave her, her mother would discover it and burn it. She reaches for her necklace and starts to say the phrases her mother taught her. A white-eyed Lasher emerges in Rowan's hotel room as she recoils, her eyes turning white. Deidre quickly recognizes that she has arrived in New Orleans and proceeds to the hotel. Rowan learns from Cyprian that Ellie hired him to guard her and that he works for the Talamasca. At Rowan's hotel, they resolve to meet and discuss Ellie's secrets. Carlotta is completely perplexed to see a regular Deidre enter the hotel foyer and announce that she is taking her back home. Despite Carlotta's efforts to persuade Deidre that Rowan is no longer alive and that she is crazy, Deidre insists that she must locate her daughter. When Deidre informs her that he is awake because she is, Carlotta becomes weak. When Deidre enters the elevators, whisperings start up again as she clings onto her jewelry. For the first time since Rowan was born, the mother and daughter pair meet eyes as the elevator door opens. Rowan beams, instantly realizing Deidre is her mother. With Deidre's throat being slashed by an ethereal force, the episode comes to a terrifying conclusion. Rowan is screaming and holding her mother as she collapses after losing consciousness. Is Deidre actually gone? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.